Hello aspirants, a very warm welcome to Skholar.com. This is Rohan Dange, your faculty for Social Security for EPFO exam, which is going to be conducted on 9th of May 2021. In the first lecture, we spoke about the status of human rights in the international arena. Now, in this lecture, we are going to talk about the constitutional status of social security and human rights in India, and what are the statutory provisions and statutory measures which are in place for securing human life in the country. So this is Rohan Dange welcoming you once again on board for a detailed discussion on the constitutional provisions in India. So without much of a further ado, let's begin. So this is lecture number 2 for your EPFO examination. Now let's talk about the directive principles of state policy. Here we speak about Article 39. Article 39 is actually oriented in such a manner that it talks about equal rights to adequate means of livelihood to all citizens. Means what? That when it comes to livelihood, you're talking about jobs, you're talking about various vocations, and in these jobs people should have an equal opportunity. There should be no discrimination on the basis of caste, religion, gender, race, ethnicity, language, region, right? So article 39 quite rightly points to equal rights to adequate means of livelihood to all the citizens, and it talks about the distribution of wealth and material resources to serve the common good and prevention of concentration of wealth and means of production. It's a very important article because this not only talks about equal opportunity of employment, but it also talks about conserving, guarding, and nurturing the mineral resources which are found in the country. Now, India is a country which is rich in mineral resources, right? There is like the Chota Nagpur Plateau. There is basically from Rajmahal Hills in Odisha and Bihar to the Nalamala Hills in Andhra Pradesh, and then through the states of Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, and Jharkhand. You see that there is a mineral belt in India. Even states like Rajasthan and Karnataka and Goa are home to a lot of minerals. Now, these minerals are a not only a natural resource, but they are also a national resource. Now, we have privatized a lot of sectors in India. Likewise, mining has also been privatized to a certain extent, and therefore, exploitation of natural resources should not lead to the concentration of wealth in the hands of few. Right, because once that happens, then the rich will become the richer and the poor will become poorer. When you talk about the means of poor, what are you talking about? Means of production, what are you talking about? You're talking about land, you're talking about labor, you're talking about capital, which is the loan which is required. So land, labor, capital, and all the other means of production should not be appropriated by only few individuals. Right. So wealth should be appropriately and equitably distributed as much as possible across the length and breadth of the country. That is what Article 39 tries to establish. And through that, it gives a message to the states that you have to form policies and laws in such a manner that it doesn't lead to the widening of the gap between the rich and the poor, whereas it actually leads to flattening of the social and the class based pyramid in the country, right? So article 39 is very important from a what you can say a socialist point of view. So it lays down certain specific objectives in clauses, sub clauses A, B, and C. Right. It talks about norms for an egalitarian operation of economic and social system of the country. Egalitarian means something which is too idealistic, something which is too pure, right? So Article 39 through its subclauses establishes the formation of an egalitarian society from the point of view of an economic lens and from the point of view of a social lens also. Further, it goes on to add that securing of adequate means of livelihood for citizens and preventing the concentration of economic power in few hands and ensuring the operation of economic system for the general good are stated as guiding principles. Guiding principles means what? Any state, suppose the state of Madhya Pradesh, if the state of Madhya Pradesh wants to come out with a law for daily wage workers and also come out with laws for the mining workers, then Article 39 should become the guiding principles for the formulation of such a law. So when a bill is introduced in the Vidhan Sabha of Madhya Pradesh and when it is enacted as a law, one should take into note that Article 39 is upheld at all cost. Right. For example, in India, the central government had brought about Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Right. It was enacted. It was introduced as a bill and enacted as a law in 2005. Now, it basically ensures equal work and protection to the underprivileged and the marginalized sections in the rural areas. Right. So Article 39 can be said to be the foundational principle of Manrega. Why not? correct? Likewise, you have Article 41. So Article 41 provides for right to work and right to education, right? Right to work is very important. Okay, right. In India, we have many states and union territories. So one should have the right to work if one moves from one state to another in the search of better employment, right? There should be no regional discrimination. Of course, there is going to be in migration and out migration in the country. There is going to be rural to urban migration. There is going to be rural to rural migration, urban to rural migration, right? And this migration is basically, it's this stream of migration is basically going to determine is basically it talks about that people will flock to areas wherever employment opportunities are available. So Article 41 states that the center or the state government should provide the right to work. Okay, because right to work means you will earn your wages or you will earn your income or you earn your salary. And once you do that, then you are able to live your life with dignity and integrity. And Article 21, which is right to life, has been interpreted by the Supreme Court as the right to live your life with dignity and integrity. But that cannot be ensured unless financial independence is available. And financial independence cannot be ensured unless right to work is available. So right to work can be associated with Article 41. Likewise, right to education is also associated with Article 41. In India, we had through a constitutional amendment, we made sure that right to education becomes one of the fundamental rights, wherein compulsory and free education is provided to children between the age of 6 to 14, right? And of course, Article 41 has an added clause where it talks about public assistance in certain cases such as unemployment, old age, sickness, and disablement. So the coverage of Article 41 is quite comprehensive. Article 41 has no bearing on the interpretation of Article 16, as it manifests that the term public assistance or relief to people who are unemployed or old or sick or disabled or in similar cases of undeserved want. Right. So Article 16, which also talks about the right to work freely in any state, has actually very little overlap with Article 41. Right. So there's another article, Article 42, which stands for providing just and human conditions of work and maternity relief. Why just is because there is a system called as caste system in India, and this caste system may be a system which is about social segregation, but it actually reflects very poorly, and it actually, this monster becomes very visible not just in social systems in the country but also when you are actually engaging economically. Right. So social disabilities actually translate into economic disabilities in our country. Unfortunate, that is the unfortunate reality of India. And therefore, Article 42 stands for providing just. Just means fair, fair and human conditions of work. Okay. And maternity relief. In India, there is not only caste-based discrimination, there is class-based discrimination also. This class-based discrimination can also be prevented by putting in forefront Article 42, which stands for providing just, which is fair and human conditions of work, and maternity relief. When you, what do you understand by human conditions of work? Conditions which are suitable for work, right? The environment wherein the air is breathable, the water is potable, and the noise levels are under control. The environment in which safety aspects are taken into consideration. The environment in which safety aspects like fire safety is taken into consideration. Also, the working hours are limited with adequate number of breaks. Right. So when you talk about the labor codes and the wages, you will definitely trace it back to Article 42 because it actually stands for providing just and human conditions of work, and of course maternity relief. Then there is another article, that is Article 43 in the Directive Principles of State Policy, which requires the state to strive to secure the worker work, a living wage, conditions of work, ensure a decent standard of life, and full enjoyment of leisure, social, and cultural opportunities. So, Article 43 actually envisions life from a very holistic point of view. It envisages that a man or woman should not only get access to work but should also get living wage. That means wage above the minimum floor levels, and the conditions of work should also ensure decent standard of life and should not militate against the person's ability to enjoy the benefits of their own employment in the social sphere, in the cultural sphere, and also should get adequate opportunities. So Article 43 has a lot of comprehensive coverage, I would say, in terms of determining a life of integrity and dignity for individuals in the country. Okay. So Manrega again can be the foundational basis of Manrega can be traced to Article 43 also, because it talks about a living wage, right? It talks about securing workers' work, right? It talks about conditions of work. Okay. So the directive principles of state policy and the fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution, they provide basis for many social security benefits, right? And based on these principles and rights, few social security laws are passed for the benefit of poor, weaker, and unorganized sections of the society. Every year, when the budget document is presented, budget which is presented as under Article 110 as the annual financial statement, what does it state? It talks about and it puts light on various schemes and social sector programs which would be undertaken by the government, and it talks about the budgetary allocations which are associated with that, thereby ensuring social security benefits to people who are living on the fringes of the society. So fundamental rights was also included in the constitution, which guaranteed right to equality under Article 14, right against exploitation under Article 23 and 24. In fact, under Article 17, it has also talked about abolishing untouchability. What do you achieve if you abolish untouchability? If you abolish untouchability, then you are in effect establishing equality or equity to a certain degree in the country, right? And untouchability has been the bane of Indian society, has been the what you can say has been prima facie the black spot on the Indian society, right? So that is abolishment of untouchability, and of course right to equality, Article 14. In fact, in 2019, Article 14 was released as a movie as well. If you have seen the movie which had Ayushman Khurrana in the lead, you would realize that that movie spoke about the right to equality in the most harshest and in the most clearest tones possible. Right to exploitation is also very important because in India there is a lot of rural to urban migration where a lot of agriculturalists are working as laborers, but they are working as bonded labor under which their basic rights are also snatched away from them. So Article 23 and 24 also speak about right against exploitation, the right of exploitation of women, the right of exploitation, the right against exploitation of children, the right against exploitation of the SC and SC communities, which generally face the wrath of the what you can say antisocial elements in the society. So these are some kind of insurance mechanisms against exploitation and in favor of equality. Then, of course, the most important article in respect of social security must be right to life, Article 21. Right. Now, how do you interpret this article is also very important. How do you read this article is also very important. Like Supreme Court has defined right to life as the right to live your life with dignity and integrity. Let's talk about the example of a beggar. If you talk about a beggar is not living, in a beggar's life, right to life is not materializing. Why? Because a beggar has to seek alms, a beggar has to literally plead and go down on his or her knees, right, for a few bucks, right? So that is pleading, that is something which militates against your dignity, against your self respect, against your self esteem, right? And it lends a lot of indignity to your life, it takes away all the integrity from your life, right? So a beggar's life, even if nobody is discriminating against that beggar, is still a life which doesn't really reflect on right to life. Okay, so it includes Article 21, which talks about right to life. It includes all the rights that are essential to main human life in a civilized society, such as food, clothes, house, medicine, and education. For example, you talk about a woman in rural India. So a woman may not be discriminated in her own household directly, but there could be various implicit in discriminations going against her. Right? Discrimination has a lot of undercurrents. Like for example, when you speak about medicine, so the household budget would not have any provision for medicine for women, whereas it will only make provision for medicine for men. Right? When you talk about clothes in every Diwali, the males of the house would buy new clothes, but the women will have to do with the older ones, right? When it comes to food, the women will have food at the end, whereas men will have the best part of the food right at the beginning, right? The household budget will not make any provisions for the education of a girl child, but it will make all the provision for the education of a male child, right? So there is See, the poison of discrimination in India runs as an undercurrent in our societies and in our families. Okay. And right to life speaks about that undercurrent. It speaks about the provisioning of food, clothes, house, medicine, and education to all. Right. Only then you can say that right to life has been secured. The right to work means the citizen's right on his society to have work according to his ability and skill with suitable minimum wages, means floor level wages. Right. For example, in India, floor level wage till some years ago was 131. Right. So anybody, if you had any work, if anybody was doing any work, he or she should get anything more than rupees 131, so that they can at least put some food on the table for their family. Right. Putting two square means for their family on the table is of utmost importance. If you cannot arrange for two meals for your family, then the right to life of your family is simply snatched away. So suitable minimum wages is absolutely important, and that will enable the man or the woman to maintain his or her life in a civilized society. A civilized society is not only talks about life, but it talks about a productive, gainful, purposeful, and a meaningful life. And to have a gainful, purposeful, productive, and a meaningful life, securing right to life is very important. And this is how right to life is defined. Okay. Right to life also is complemented by right to work. Let's talk about the concurrent list. Now, what is a concurrent list? There are obviously the various subjects in Indian Constitution are divided into three lists: the state list, or sorry, the central list, the state list, and the concurrent list. So, subjects which are listed under the central list are the sole prerogative of the central government. The central government will come out with appropriate laws, programs, and policies for that. Subjects which are listed under the state list are basically the prerogative and the sole responsibility of the state governments, wherein they are charged with the responsibility of formulating, drafting, and enacting laws. Concurrent list is a list which basically pertains to both the central government also has the power and the authority to enact a law in that particular subject, and the state also has is the concerned authority here. Right. So in the concurrent list, there are some entries like entries 21, 22, 23, 24, and 26. They authorize the state governments to take necessary steps for regulation and control of commercial and industrial monopolies, trade unions, industrial and labor disputes. See, restricting and preventing monopoly in Indian society is absolutely critical. Very, very critical. Why? Because if you talk about monopolies, they actually create a concentration of wealth, and rich start becoming richer, and the chunk of the population, a major chunk, a substantial chunk of the population gets left behind. Right? Everybody should get a part to be of the commercial growth story. But if in a monopolistic situation, only two or three entities are actually lording over the entire economic trajectory of the country, which is very unfair, right? So these entries of the concurrent list 21, 22, 23, 24, and 26, they authorize the state governments to take necessary steps for regulations and control of commercial and industrial monopolies. And of course, social security and social insurance, employment and unemployment, welfare of labor, etc., respectively, with an intention to ensure protection of interest of all citizens. What are the interests of citizens? Citizens' interest is welfare. Citizens would want welfare benefits to be extended to them, right? Like, for example, the subsidy in fertilizer. That is a welfare measure, correct? For example, the what you can say employment services which are provided by the central and the state governments to the youth of the country, right? Then you talk about social security and social insurance, in which you talk about savings through EPFO organizations like Employment's Provident Fund Organization or ESIC, like so. EPFO, ESIC are all the instruments through which savings and investments are encouraged in the Indian society, right? When you talk about social security, you're also talking about the social security measures which are meant for women, which are meant for children, right? Various funds which mobilize money for the betterment of people living on the fringes in the society. Social insurance, I had just explained it to you, Janani Suraksha Yojana, Antyodaya Anna Yojana, under which the poorest of the poor are extended cereals and grains at the throwaway prices, right? So such elements shall be secured, and they should be secured not only by the central government but by the state government also, and therefore they are kept in the concurrent list so that both the center and the state are empowered to take the right decisions. In India, of course, the social security schemes have been in existence since a long period of time, and they can be divided into a pre-independence phase and the post-independence phase, right? In the pre-independence phase, the human needs were limited, but as society became more complex, as society grew in the post-independence phase also, we realized that the needs and demands of the people had also become wide. There was an array of demands, and since the society had also become complex, the issue had to be dealt in a more comprehensive manner in the post-independence era. So as society has evolved organically over a period of time, you will see that social security measures also have to evolve over a period of time, right? In the pre-independence phase, we never spoke about cyber security, but after IT revolution in 1990s, today we speak about cyber security as well in the post-independence era. Correct? We are living in the coronavirus pandemic. So very soon the coronavirus vaccine may also become compulsory for everyone, which was not the case in pre-independence phase, right? So the social, cultural, economic, and the commercial landscape will keep on changing, and with that, the social security and its development in the country will also keep on changing. So in the pre-independence phase can be divided into the Hindu period, which you learn about in ancient history, the Muslim period, which is basically pertaining to the medieval history, and the British period, which is all about the advent of Europeans, right? So during the British period, hundreds of factories developed in Bombay, Madras, Ahmedabad, Calcutta, Nagpur, and Kanpur, right? So basically, in ancient India, there was a joint Hindu family system. Now, this joint Hindu family system was at the center stage of the social organization in India. Today, the system of joint family has disintegrated because nuclear families have taken over because of rural to urban migration and urban proliferation. Right. Now, when you talk about social organization, so the joint family system was the original cell for security, right? And it was analogous to further institutions because it provided a cushion, it provided a fallback option to everybody, and there was a lot of income support. The reciprocal obligations of the parents to support the child in infancy and of the son to support the parents in old age were represented in social insurance by the solidarity of generations. Because the children used to live with their parents. Today, that's not the case. Right? During the Hindu period, the children never left their household. And as a result, they would also take care of their parents when they would reach the age of dependency. And when they were children, they were taken care of by their parents. So these reciprocal obligations could be meted out. They were functional because back in those days, children did not leave their houses. So the society in India did not witness the crass struggle between the employer and the employee, or the exploiter and the exploitee, and the oppressor and the oppressed, apart from obviously the caste system, right? But apart from that, class struggle was absent from the landscape of Indian economy. You will find such details in various literary works like Arthashastra, Yajnavalkya, Brahaspati, Narada Smriti. Okay, so Kautilya's Arthashastra is the building example of the introduction of philosophy of social security in ancient India. Kautilya attached a great importance to female labor, and female labor in ancient India was recommended in occupation like husking, grinding, and winnowing, etc. Right. Kautilya also mentioned a number of pension schemes in his work. Right. So one, it is very rightly said that Kautilya is in fact the first statesman of India. Right. The first political statesman and the first political scientist of India was in fact Kautilya, right? And that is also reflected in the advanced thoughts that he has. He said that the state itself should provide support to the poor, pregnant women, to their newborn offspring, to the orphans, to the aged, to the infirm, and the afflicted and the helpless. In the 8th century, Shukracharya makes special provisions for social security, particularly regarding sickness benefits, pensions, old age benefits, family pensions, and maintenance allowance. Now, these things are very important. Why? Because, see, a certain level of historical background is also important to be understood if you want to understand social security. Correct? And in exam, they will also ask you one or two questions pertaining to history. So, you should know about Shukracharya and Kautilya as well. During the Mughal period, there were frequent warfare, there was always pillage and plunder of the villages. The Indian society was constantly in a state of struggle. So the impact of Muslim culture and the thought on India gave a new depth to the concept of charity and social service. Islam enjoins five major duties on its followers, one of which is zakat, meaning charity. So zakat was made necessary on the Muslim subjects. So the Mughals had a special government department to supervise the administration of charities. So see, charities and philanthropy can also be traced back to the medieval part times. Okay, and amongst the Mughal rulers, Akbar the Great made certain provisions for the learned. Shah Jahan made liberal grants to spiritual guides, literary men, and musicians. Right. So there were many endowments which were given or which were passed on to a lot of people in our society, including the poor, during the Muslim period or the medieval period also. During the British period, the Indian industry had declined considerably after the Britishers came because the local industry was completely ruined and the British capitalist class had taken over India. So a certain sense of class exploitation had begun in the country. The first cotton textile factory was set up in Bombay as early as 1854, and along with large-scale cotton and jute textile industries, seasonal industries like cotton ginning, cotton and jute pressing, and rice milling also cropped up, which meant that more and more labor was required, which also meant that this labor was systematically, carefully, and continuously exploited by the British people. Okay. New trends had started developing in India during British period as a result of technological developments, industrial revolution, and mechanization. Right. So in India, we had two classes: the employers and the employees. The employers were obviously the colonial masters, and the employees were obviously the Indians who were subject to their authority. So the Indians were prostrating again in front of the British authorities. The joint family system also here lost its validity and lost its what you can say roots in the Indian economy, because now in search of better employment, people and boys had started exploring different areas as well, for which they had to leave their houses. There was hardly any law of the land in India which would govern labor matters. Right? If you read about the Indigo Revolution, or if you read about any other agitation in India, you will see that the agrarian class or the handicraftsmen and the artisans were brutally, what you can say, exploited by the British employers. Right? So class struggle and lack of social security were the hallmark features of the British period in India. Right? Here, there was also an exposure to serious accidents due to unprotective methods of handling machines, and sickness also due to unhealthy living and working conditions, right? Because the working conditions had started deteriorating, right? Which made the workers entirely incapable of work, which in turn considerably reduced their earning capacity. See, if you're a daily wage earner, right? If you're earning some sort of money or some portion of money on a daily basis, and if you fall sick, so your income will definitely be eroded, right? So because of the unhealthy working conditions, many people's incomes were eroded. The British capitalists obviously were very profit oriented, and their goal was wealth accumulation. So they wanted more production, right? But for less wages, because that would increase their profit margin, right? So for the British capitalists to earn more profits, the Indians had to bear losses in form of wage erosion or wage corrosion, right? So there was a double income loss which resulted in economic insecurity amongst the Indians, which led to a lot of ruination and penury and beggary also at times. Of course, there is the impact of the two world wars, which deteriorated both economic and social conditions of the working class. In fact, Europe was, which was the theater of the war, was also not spared. Countries like UK, France, Germany, and even Japan and USSR had faced the wrath of the wars, and they were also now to start upon a practice of nation building under Marshall Plan, right? Meanwhile, the establishment of International Labour Organization gave a moral boost to Indian workers, so that now they could have organized movements for redressing their grievances, particularly the need for protecting workmen against hazards of life such as injury, sickness, maternity, old age. So the International Labour Organization formalized social security. One can say that. Okay, so there were some acts also which followed the what you can say the conventions under International Labour Organization, like the Fatal Accidents Act 1855, the Factories Act 1948. There was also something called as the Workmen's Compensation Act 1923. Very important, again, could be asked as a factual question in the exam. The Royal Commission on Labour was appointed in 1929. Even the year could be asked. The Commission recommended a scheme of health insurance of industrial workers on a contributory basis, financed by employers and by small deductions from the wages of workers. So, if the worker is earning 100 rupees per day, so the employer would pay 10 rupees per day to maintain health insurance, and the worker would also pay 10 rupees. So, 20 rupees per day would go into the worker's account as a part of health insurance, right? So the Royal Commission also emphasized the necessity for making some provisions against old age, as the workers are unable to save out of their low earnings against old age. Further, the Commission was recommended for maternity benefits as well as payment of gratuity. Right. So very recently we had amended the Maternity Benefit Act also. Initially, women used to get what you can say lesser time or lesser maternity benefit leave. Right now they get 26 weeks of maternity benefit, which is 6 months. Okay. So there is also the what you can say a committee which was presided over by Professor B.P. Adarkar in 1943, and it was entrusted with the task of preparing details of compulsory insurance for industrial workers. The Adarkar's report was modified by ILO experts, and finally it was passed as the Employees State Insurance Act 1948. Very important. Professor B.P. Adarkar's committee, which was formed in 1943. Okay, very well could be asked in the exam. In the post-independence phase, you talked about organization of health insurance schemes like the what you can say Ayushman Bharat. Please read about Ayushman Bharat. You could get a question on that. There are typical health insurance schemes which are only applicable to factory workers, revision of Workmen Compensation Act, central law for maternity benefit, and extension to other classes of workers, the right within specific limits to leave with allowance during sickness. Right. So basically, the labor policy which set out in the 5-year plans in India, which had begun in 1951, because India had adopted the Russian model of centrally planned economy, in which the planning commission used to come out with 5-year plans. So these 5-year plans, the first 5-year plan started in 1951, which focused on the basic needs of workers for food and clothing also, right? Because this was the time when India was now going to become self-reliant. So the first 5-year plans had two main objectives. The main objectives were securing a better standard of life for people and securing social justice. Okay. Apart from that, it also spoke about improved health services, wider provisions of social security, better educational opportunities, and increased recreational and cultural facilities. So the first 5-year plan started from 1951 and ended in 1956 with twin objectives of better standard of life and social justice. Right, there are certain essential facts regarding the first 5-year plan. It talks about mutual consultation, right, amongst the people, which will bring about effective policy coordination. Right, the plan also observed that worker today is not satisfied with merely the wage that he or she receives, but expects to be protected against any type of natural and other risks arising out of employment, like disability. So I have just given you how 5-year plans also started securing social security and human rights. In the next lecture, we will be talking about the 5-year plans in greater detail. I was just giving you a heads up in this lecture. So this is myself, Rohan Dange, signing off from Skholar.com as of now. I'll be seeing you on Skholar.com in the next lecture, that is lecture number 3. So till the time we meet next, happy learning, keep revising and keep practicing social distancing.